Now, it's been 10 months since fighting erupted in South Sudan. Thousands have died and 1.5 million people have been displaced. Negotiations are currently ongoing at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. China is central to those negotiations. This week on Talk Africa, China's Special Envoy on African Affairs talks about China's role in the peace negotiations and China's message to South Sudan.
The fighting that broke out in Ajuba barracks last December spiraled rapidly into a civil war. China was among the first in those early days to spot the danger and to call for a ceasefire. In contrast to other international powers, it has maintained a consistent role pushing for peace. The country's Special Envoy on African Affairs has been on the front line.
But this time, as all these situations change and China being requested again and again by IGAD country, AU, and even South Sudan government, we should be more active than before to be involved in mediation. So I think our leaders took the decision that we should do something more.
That marks a shift in foreign policy. China has long publicly pursued a policy of not interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. But in South Sudan, it has seen an opportunity to make a positive difference, even if the going has been tough. Regional mediators have been struggling for months to get the two sides to agree a deal, and China has publicly pushed both sides.
The patience of the regional countries and the international community are being worn out because they haven't seen the real results. They see only the looming famine and the continued suffering of the people there. It is high time to stop this.
China has significant investments in South Sudan, and they've been threatened by the conflict. But analysts say its involved approach could mean more engagement with Africa in future.
China is a major power, and there are expectations that the major powers will behave responsibly in taking up the responsibility of peace and security where appropriate. I think in this instance, things have become so bad in South Sudan. Neither the government nor the rebels are able to maintain the peace. Yet things have to go on.
China already has military engineers and medics in South Sudan, 300 or so personnel who are part of the UN's peacekeeping mission. With the combat troops, though, it's clear China is determined to ensure both sides in South Sudan appreciate its commitment to stabilizing the country.
Ambassador Chong, thank you very much for your time. You're on a two-day visit here in South Sudan. What is the nature of your current mission? What is it you're doing here?
I'm here to cover two countries. First is Ethiopia, Addis, and immediately they sent me to another city where the negotiation be held for the government side and also opposition side. And IGAD chief mediator, Ambassador Seyum, was also there. I actually meeting with all these parties concerned to listen to their opinions and ideas. We just try our best to follow the situation, what is happening, what is going to happen, what their opinions are, what is happening now, and what they expect China to do.
What do they expect China to do? China has been very central to the negotiations ever since the conflict started. What do they expect China to do?
I think generally they all want China to contribute for peacemaking and reaching earlier a solution to bring down this conflict. But of course, each side has a particular request, want China to do this and that. Sometimes the request from the opposition were just contrary to the government side. In this conflict, we've taken some steps which we never did before. It's a breakthrough, and it is also a new challenge. You know, in the past, whenever there is a domestic conflict in a foreign country, sometimes a friendly country happened, we've been pretty restricted by our self-principle, that is non-interference policy, which was carried out very rigidly and in the past. So we always turn our back on any non-governmental side, any opposition. But this time, as all these situations change and China being requested again and again by IGAD country, AU, and even South Sudan government, we should be more active than before to be involved in mediation. So I think our leaders took the decision that we should do something more.
All right, let's look at the talks up until this time now, because there have been 3 ceasefires agreements that have been violated. In your view, though, what are the real sticking points to finding a lasting political solution to the South Sudanese crisis?
I've been asked this question again and again by different people, including you. I always ask myself, am I qualified to answer this question? I sometimes doubt about myself. Of course, we try our best to understand the situation. I try our best to communicate with all parties concerned, including a lot of very veteran diplomats who involved in this for a long time. But we always think, first, we are new here. We are still new here. Even you think that we are here for 2 decades, we can compare with hundreds of years of history here. We are new here. This is first. Second, this conflict happened here in South Sudan is basically an African conflict. The best way to solve an African conflict is, of course, by African way and by African people. Then you ask what role China is going to play. I think we are secondary and we are supportive. We just show our concern and give our full support. Same time, carry out the humanitarian support to relieve people's suffering. I think that's what we are doing. That we have done, that's what we're going to do. We very carefully listen to all parties' ideas. Probably sometimes we give advice based on our own experience. We will always say, this is our experience. We draw lessons here and there. But anyway, if you want to take our advice, do it very carefully to connect with your own situation and environment. It is not always universal.
China has, for the first time, though, sent about 700 troops to South Sudan to help control the situation. First, this is a first for China, and what is the significance of that?
This matter probably has been over-focused by media and by people there. Of course, we have decided to send in a battalion armed force here, but this is to join the peacekeeping force of the UN. It's strictly under the command of UN peacekeeping headquarters. One of the big reasons we do that is to show our firm and concrete support of the peacemaking efforts by UN, by IGAD, and by all parties concerned. We don't not only talk about it, we contribute for that. But when you have the force here, you always have the risk. They are the soldiers. They could become target. By carrying out that job, they could also put themselves in danger. But probably that's the risk we are going to take, to show that China is a real responsible power and to show that we care about the peace.
In terms of finding the political situation, in terms of speaking to both parties in this conflict, what is China's message?
We are friends, brother, and partner. But you don't only talk about it, do something about it. So in the past, we've done a lot of things, political and economical side. But from 2012, on the FOCAC conference, military conference, our chairman at the time, Mr. Hu Jintao, for the first time declared that apart from political and economic side, we are going to do something more on the peace and security side. So this is the policy realization, implementation, and to show that we don't only make our promise, we're going to realize it. But of course, that is under condition with full consultation with our partner here. And we definitely need their support because we are pretty new in this field. Without consultation, advice, suggestion from our African partners, we will not be able to do that. So first, we have determination. Second, we have our cooperation from them.
In terms of peace and security, though, because you mentioned that is a changing policy, in terms of peace and security, what exactly will be China's mandate?
We just started. We try step by step. You know, China sometimes doing things a little bit different from other countries. Some people there have one manifesto after another before even they start the first step. But you come to China, you see even the open and reform policy carried by Deng Xiaoping. Our slogan is always try one step after another and find your own way under the water. So manifesto is important, but it's no more important than what you're going to do. Particularly when you come with this humble position. We learn, we try, we have our determination and what we're going to do, telling outside the world. I think that's probably good enough for the Chinese. We do not want to be seen by somebody like, you said a lot of things, you cannot do a lot of things like what you have expressed. So we think more important than manifesto is what you're going to do.
All right. A few months ago, though, in December, when the conflict broke out, some Chinese oilfield workers were evacuated. When will China, though, deem it appropriate to have its nationals return back to that situation?
It's a dilemma for the government. On one side, we want to secure our people's security. Their welfare is always the responsibility of the government. But on the other side, your ability is limited. Particularly, you cannot force people to evacuate. What we provide is called consular service. What do you mean by service? Service means you do not force people to do things. All you do is you provide them with options and a choice. So what we do here is still the responsibility of consular protection and consular service. But we do have a burden in the oil field. When the time and the situation become very dangerous, we were in pretty difficult position because this country is young. Most of the engineers and the technicians and workers in the fields replaced by the South Sudanese citizens. after the independence. Some of the original engineers and the technicians withdraw back to Sudan. We did our best to train these new engineers and technicians, workers, but it's very short. They stopped the oil field production in only 6 months after independence, then stopped for a whole year. So we do not have enough local workers to maintain the production of the oil field when the conflict started. But if we evacuate all Chinese staff, the whole oil field will collapse down, without any doubt. Local employee and staff didn't have the ability to run the oil field. But if we still maintain our own people there, we risk their life.
Welcome back to Talk Africa. Ambassador Xiong Shanhua is our guest this week on the program, talking about China's and Africa's relationship. Ambassador Xiong, thank you very much. Now, I want to broaden this conversation a little bit. And over the last year, we have seen a slightly different China on the continent. We saw China sending in medical staff and aid to Ebola-hit countries. We saw China reacting to the situation in Mali, sending troops under the UN banner as well. We saw China offering assistance in Nigeria to find the missing girls. We're seeing China as well very proactive in the South Sudan crisis. Is there a change in China's foreign policy approach now?
As a media, you always want to emphasize something more noticeable to people, more obvious. For me, like diplomats, the change is always there. I joined the foreign service for over 30 years. I sometimes look back to see what happened in our diplomacy abroad. It's completely different. But all these changes are slowly, steadily, and I tried find the correct way and do it, even in Africa. I think both sides have the wish to develop its own economy. Second, we were friends for a long time. We both come to a new stage of our economy, and we, of course, need our new approach and new cooperation. The cooperation itself is also developing. You can't just sit there to meet with this. You need to stand up and work to it. So what happened is that we just work towards even more close cooperation, even more helping each other, and not only, and also extend the scope of the cooperation from purely political to political economy, and then peace and security, and also including academic exchange. Both scholars now have a lot of connections, exchanges, and visiting. All this seems to be a pretty comprehensive connections working together with African people and African country. At the same time, you notice that African continent is also have a big change. So all these changes, all evolutions are inevitable. It is there.
Let's address some criticisms here. And there are critics who say that China is in Africa just for its natural resources. How do you address that criticism, and what exactly is driving China further and further into Africa?
It's not completely wrong. China come here for something. But despite all our political relations, partnership, when companies come here, they do things like company without profit. Company will collapse, will bankruptcy. So what they're going to do is to maintain themselves. But China's involvement, whether we realize it or not, we did break the monopoly in the old games. You know, in those days, how much for 1 barrel of oil? 6 cents. How much oil you need to sell to the world, to the so-called world at the time, to buy back a suit for yourself? You probably need 1 shipment. What's the price now? It's around $100 a barrel. With 1 barrel of oil, you can change back a suitcase of a suit. What does it mean to Africa about this? That means in the old games, in the so-called colonial period, whatever you do, the harder you do, the more you export, the poorer you become. You just barely can make the end meet. When China stepped into the world market, we didn't quite realize it at first, but anyway, the phrase always say that what China going to buy is doomed to be expensive. What China is going to sell, it ought to be cheap for those countries by the economic need to export their raw material. Do you think they are in a better position or in a worse position? In the old games, decades, centuries experience proved that more they do, the poorer they become. It's not rewarding. But now, by selling their raw material, it do not only make themselves sufficient, but also they can accumulate capital for their own industrialization. This is happening in all the continent, where all these bridges, highways, railways, factories, oil refineries come from. It's not come from China. We help them to build it, but with their own capital accumulated by export of raw material. This changed the whole game of this continent. Then why it's still being criticized? Of course, we've done something bad for some people. Those who dominate the price, make the oil only 6 cents a barrel, sell African people the clothes more than $100 for 1 clothes. These people, their interests be damaged by China. We brought in suddenly a fair play for all parties. Even probably before we realize it. But that's what's happening. Some people are not happy with it, all right. But I think the people who enjoy from this are happy with it. It's true. It's everywhere. So I think President Zuma of South Africa once said that, never mind what they said, we are the people who benefit from it. We know exactly what game it is. What the game was before, what the game it is now. That's it. We are not stupid. Those who always say China here, China there, some of them may think we are stupid, but we are not. That's why this cooperation is still carried on despite all this nonsense here and there. I think the force to pursue a better life is inevitable. It's unstoppable. It's happening in China. It's going to happen here. It's happening here, actually.
All right, but there is a question, though, and one U.S. official, high-ranking U.S. official, did mention a few months ago and said Africa must make sure that the roads are not leading, from the oil fields to the ports to Shanghai. I mean, Africa has always talked about being just a supplier of raw material and an importer of finished products without, without much benefit. How is China going to be addressing this kind of talk?
We don't have to. We do not have to address this. It's been answered again and again. But whatever we said, that's not important. It's always important whatever we do and what we do together with our African partners. We understand each other, we support each other, we benefit from each other. Isn't that enough? Do we still have to impress people? I think it's not that necessary. Some of them could never be addressed. Let them go. That's my answer.
You talked about the economic aspect and China and Africa's economic development having changed the global marketplace. In terms of global politics, though, do you see Africa and China's relationship changing the world order?
I think so. Though this will be not happy for some people, those who benefit from the old order, of course, will resist any change to the game. In 2008, when the financial crisis started, we saw a trend to change the old order probably to a new, but then this trend is weakening. That means the force for reform is not strong enough because we do not have Africa there yet. When China's economy was so small in the 50s, 60s, we know whatever you say, it's just being ignored. This happened also to African countries. When you become big enough, when this continent's economy becomes big enough, you will know what is your strength. It definitely will change the old order. I think that's good. The world needs to move forward, need to develop into a much fairer place for the whole humankind. We suffer from the old system too much, too long. China's standing up brought about some of the change, but definitely it's not enough. It's not strong enough, so when we see a total developed African continent, the world is definitely going to change. That probably will be the most greatest thing we have ever seen.
All right, a final comment on this segment now. How do you see China and Africa's relationship evolving in the short term? How do you see it evolving in the long term?
Oh. I'm not that perspective, but anyway, I'm still a practitioner. I work on this continent, try to do my job bit by bit. For the short term, all these cooperations going on, it's great. I've seen almost all the infrastructure project being either done by Chinese or by some other countries, but anyway, with all full support from African countries. And this seems to be inevitable. Development, industrialization. We're happy we contribute. We're probably also happy in some field we took the lead. We encourage other people or stimulate other people to follow suit. That's pretty good. In the long term, when we see a total developed African continent, I do not want to restrict my follow-up what they can do, but I think they will enjoy a much better world at that time. They know what they are going to do. I don't need to teach them.
Ambassador Zhang, thank you very much for your time.